I had been doing writing on Close Encounters before Jaws. So Jaws actually came after I began working on some kind of a conceptual narrative on how to tell a story about UFOs and Watergate and kind of putting that together. Certainly before Watergate, my whole concept was the UFO phenomenon in contemporary America. Then after Watergate, it was, of course, it's going to be a government conspiracy and the UFO phenomenon wrapped into one.
What the hell is going on around here? Who the hell are you people?
This was ongoing. This was, through the Jaws process and then through post-production on Jaws. It was just a movie I was going to make next. I didn't know if I could get it financed because people were balking at financing it before Jaws. But I had two producers. I had Julia Phillips and Michael Phillips, who were very strong producers. They had produced Taxi Driver, and they had produced the Sting. They were very supportive of me and pretty much said to me, "Don't worry, we're going to get the financing for this. Just figure it out." For one thing, I didn't believe it was science fiction. I didn't coin this, but I was liberally saying, this isn't science fiction, this is science speculation. Because I had a real deep-rooted belief that we had been visited. And in this century, I was a real sort of UFO devotee in the 1970s and was really into the whole UFO phenomenon from everything I was reading. So it was something for me that was science.
This is a flying saucer.
That's the one I saw.
Now, I've revised my thinking. As I grew up, got a little bit older and began to understand that with all the video cameras in the world today, why have UFO sightings diminished?
Now, with all those shutters clicking, where is the indisputable photographic evidence?
When before the camcorder craze, UFO sightings were flourishing. And so I'm a little more skeptical now than I was in the 70s when I made the picture. But I really believed it. And so for me, it was about research, reading books on the matter, and eventually meeting my breakthrough partner. When I say breakthrough partner, he didn't write the screenplay with me, but he inspired the title. And that's J. Allen Hynek, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the Project Blue Book debunker, working for the military as a civilian consultant, going around and looking at all these UFO stories and finding astronomical, natural, logical explanations for what people were perceiving to be extraordinary or extraterrestrial. And he was bringing everything down to a terrestrial level until finally he just couldn't explain about 10% of the sightings. And the 10% of the sightings he couldn't explain were so compelling, the witnesses themselves were so compelling, that he eventually resigned his position to pursue an investigation and a lot of writing on the entire UFO phenomenon. And I called him up and I'd read his book, and he's the one that shared his title with me, which is why I call the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
And the Close Encounters of the Third Kind are the most interesting of all.
Initially, my producing partners in the studio thought I was crazy because they said it has no meaning. What does it mean? Close Encounters of the Third Kind. What does that mean?
Close Encounter of the Third Kind is really when you meet them.
And so one of my biggest struggles, it turned out, was not getting the film financed, because after Jaws, everybody was willing to offer me financing for my next picture. It was getting my title through the marketing department at Columbia Pictures.
Have you recently had a close encounter?
But I remember when I wrote the script, I kind of wrote it backwards. I started with the landing and then tried to back the rest of the story into how do they get there? And how can we have an operatic third act encounter between them and us in a beautiful musical way? Because the idea of music was just something I thought, well, mathematics is a way of communicating with perhaps another species from off the planet, but mathematics is also music. You know, I thought, wouldn't it be great if the math basically is musical math, and they start to communicate with each other through lights, colors, and musical tones. So all this was, out of order in my brain, but it found order when I began to write the script from the last scene backwards.
I just want to know that it's really happening.
I think in casting Close Encounters, what I was really looking for were actors who were still closer to their own memories of their own childhoods. Richard Dreyfuss was a bigger kid than the children he was raising in his suburban house.
Where you can see Pinocchio, which is a lot of furry animals and magic, and you'll have a wonderful time.
Monsieur Neri, I envy you.
Francois Truffaut, as he was in real life, was a child just of heart. He was just as honest as any man I had ever met, in the sense that he was in touch with the things that make children eternally optimistic. And Truffaut was that kind of a person. I saw that when I saw his performance in Wild Child, and I saw that in every movie he ever directed. And so he was my first choice, even though I went to other actors thinking he'd say no. I didn't even call him. I went to a number of actors until I finally got the courage to phone up Francois and ask him if he'd play Monsieur Lacombe. He had a real aspect of himself that was like a child. Everybody in the movie, except some of the more rank-and-file military, personnel, I went more for the cynic, the kind of life-hardened adult. But most everybody else, we were kids, and we made this picture in the spirit of childhood and believing in things that don't make sense, that only children believe in, because it doesn't have to make sense for a child to deeply believe in something. I knew what I wanted to put on screen. I mean, I had very strong images. Maybe I wasn't that good at articulating the images. I'm talking about the nebulous quality of light and how it strikes the optics of a lens and what it does to the lens. It puts these kind of circles around the nodal point of the light. I was describing it that way. I used to park my car, I guess, on Airport Boulevard near LAX, and I used to watch all the planes all stacked up out in the sky, coming in one after the other 5 miles apart. And I used to watch that and say, God, wouldn't that be amazing if I get that same effect coming into the final zone at the Devil's Tower in Wyoming? And so all the effects guys went out and looked at that, and it turned out great. I didn't know what the mothership would look like, so we tried various things. My first concept was, well, the mothership's just a big pie pan with no lights on it at all, but it blocks out the sky. It just chokes off the ambient light, and I wanted to have some kind of a big shadow just covering everybody as this silent, black, featureless pie pan comes across the landing zone. And then I was in India shooting my last couple of days on Close Encounters, and I kept passing from the hotel in Bombay on the way to Hal, where we were shooting about 2-hour drive, and there was this huge refinery out there, and I thought the refinery was amazing. I took some pictures of it. And then later I noticed how beautiful the San Fernando Valley looked with all the lights from Mulholland Drive. And I remember taking these pictures I took of this refinery, which was all these steel crossbeams with 50-watt light bulbs everywhere, and saying, well, what if that's the superstructure of the mothership, and underneath it is the lights of the San Fernando Valley? I remember giving that concept to Ralph McQuarrie, who painted a conceptual painting of my vision, and I don't think I varied more than 5% from what Ralph gave me on paper that day. And I remember Joe Alves gave me a model of Devil's Tower. Joe found Devil's Tower. He had looked at Shiprock and all the John Ford monuments, in Monument Valley, but it was all too well known to movie audiences. And Joe came back one day and says, I found the place you're looking for. It's called Devil's Tower, or Devil's Postpile in Wyoming. And he showed me these amazing pictures, and I just said, with all the fluted sides, that's it. That's the place. Everything after that was easy. I remember one day with the tape recorder going with Joe in the room and several other people in the room, I pretty much just spitballed the entire ending. What would come first, second, third, all the different movements of the symphony of light and sound and emotion. It was coming to me. It was coming to me so fast that when I got home, I didn't need the tape recorder. I remembered what I had said, and I basically, that was the night that scene went to paper. It was never on paper until Joe Alves gave me the model miniature of Devil's Tower and the set he was proposing to build. And that's when the whole thing came into focus for me. I remember thinking how much easier Close Encounters was from Jaws, because all the sets in Close Encounters didn't roll and pitch. There weren't 35-mile-an-hour winds, hitting us in the face, taking the tops off the waves and making our lives miserable. My crew wasn't vomiting. We were on terra firma. And after Jaws, everything after that was easy. Even though we had a set that was the biggest set ever built in an interior space, ever in history. It was the largest interior space without center supports that Joe Alves could find in the entire world, that was big enough to house the vision of this huge set that Joe was going to construct. So for me, because that set wasn't moving, I felt every day I went to work how lucky I was off the water. And I think had I not made Jaws, Close Encounters would have been the toughest production of my memory. My inspiration for E.T. came when I was a little boy. I mean, E.T. is really based on two things: the divorce of my parents, and even before that, all my imaginary friends. But I remember the idea coalescing a little bit more when I made Close Encounters. And when I did the scene where we called the little extraterrestrial Puck, by the way, thanks to Dickens from Great Expectations. And when the little extraterrestrial did the Kodai hand signs to Francois Truffaut, turned around and went back on the ship, I thought, wait a second, what if that extraterrestrial didn't go back on the ship? What if it was a foreign exchange program, and the astronauts, or the cosmonauts, or whatever you want to call them, the terrestrial nauts, go up on the ship with Richard Dreyfuss in exchange for one extraterrestrial staying behind as an ambassador, in good faith. And I began to think about, should I change my movie right now? And then I thought, something, that notion really jives with this imaginary friend concept I've been working on all my life, which is why I brought an E.T. to Columbia first, because I felt guilty that I would take it to Universal, my home, or Warner Brothers, my other home, when I felt that there was some inspiration that happened while I was making Close Encounters. So I brought it to Columbia. Of course, the rest is history. They turned me down. They didn't like it. This was the first time Michael Kahn and I ever worked together. I interviewed 30 editors. And when Michael came in, he was shy, he was reserved, he was a worker. He was a worker bee. And he just loved being in the cutting room. We had so many things in common that we stopped talking film. We started talking about where we grew up and how we grew up. And I felt, even before working with him, that he and I were related in some way. So it was a no-brainer to hire Michael that day. And it's one of the best choices I've made in my entire life, because Michael, with the exception of one movie, has edited every picture since, and including Close Encounters.
You see that?
Oh, yes.
And on Close Encounters, putting together that last sequence was a logistical nightmare. But Michael somehow organized all the rolls of film. I cut the thing at my Marina Del Rey apartment. We had put a cutting room there, which I rented this apartment. And we had stacks of dailies, not broken down, based on all the different segments of the last encounter. To this day, nothing has been harder than putting together the last 25 minutes of Close Encounters. Nothing. John doesn't like to read the scripts very much when I make a movie. He would rather just see the rough cut, and all the impressions that he gets from the rough cut go into his process, and the music is drawn down from the heaven that he pays off to get the best notes, better than anybody else in town anyway. He's got some deal with the note guy,
Play the 5 tones.
In this case, I needed a pre-recording of the musical duel between the ARP synthesizer and the mothership. John spent a lot of time coming up with those 5 notes. And as John said, it can't sound like a song, and it can't sound like a fragment. It's got to be somewhere between a fragment and a song. So it can't be 7 notes, which is a song, and it can't be 4 notes. So he decided mathematically it would be 5 notes. And then I remember one day I came over to his house and he played me about 100 5-note combinations, until together we picked. And that was, and it just sounded right. first thing that I remember was being forced to finish it before it was really ready to be finished. So I kind of felt that I was being pushed into finishing the movie based on huge corporate matters which I had no ability to comprehend. Something about Columbia facing bankruptcy, the Close Encounters was going to either break the company or it was going to get the company out of the red that it was in. Daniel Melnick, who's the last studio guy when we released Close Encounters, he was the good cop who basically came to me and said, look, take your time. I know you got to finish it, but what can I do to make your life a little bit better? So he was really, had a great bedside manner with directors, and especially with me, and helped me get over the pressure that New York was putting on me to get the movie out in November. But what I didn't understand, I didn't know very much about marketing in those days, but I didn't understand why they would take a film that was supposed to make its money back, at the very least, and release it only in 2 theaters, the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood and the Ziegfeld in New York. But the miracle was we sold out for 6 weeks in Hollywood at the Dome, and 4 weeks we sold out every day at the Ziegfeld. And then I thought, okay, then everybody in the world seeing it in these 2 theaters, who's gonna come when we go wide? And we went wide. It was almost like a brand new opening day release. We had tremendous numbers that first day of wide release. But I always think, even to this day, that Columbia would have made even more money on Close Encounters had we opened wide on the same day and didn't platform the film in 2 exclusive runs, but that was their decision to make. But there was a lot of pressure on me to finish the movie because of their corporate, headaches and all the stuff that I didn't know anything about then. I know a little bit more about it now. It was tough. That was the toughest thing because I wasn't able to cut the movie down to size. I wasn't able to shape it properly.
Roy, what are you doing?
I thought maybe I had too much Richard Dreyfuss going crazy building the mountain. Didn't have a chance to edit that down a little bit. And even the effects were rushed. Some of the effects are brilliant, but some of the effects we could have done better on if we had another month or 2. But 3 years later, the special edition was closer to my vision in '77 with a few more moments of investigating other extremely bizarre phenomenon, like that huge ship in the middle of the Gobi Desert. I mean, that was a scene that I wanted to shoot for the first time I made the movie. Didn't have it in the budget, didn't have it in the schedule, so couldn't shoot it, so it wound up in the movie. There were several scenes like that I put in, but the deal with the devil, in this sense, was in order to get the money to shoot the special edition, I had to show the audience something that the marketing department at Columbia felt they wanted to see. I didn't want to see it, but they thought the audience wanted to go inside the ship. So when I said, okay, all right, I'll give you that. We'll show the inside of the ship. Richard will walk on, look around. And now can I have my money to cut and shoot a few extra scenes? Yes, you can have your money. You can do what you want. And it was great. But when I had a chance to combine the 2 versions to the ultimate version, the first thing I did was I excised Richard inside the ship because I really, really felt that the inside of that mothership was the exclusive property of the imagination of audiences everywhere, that I should never have gone there. I went there to get the money to make the movie I wanted to make 3 years later, but that's something that shouldn't have been in the picture in the first place. For me, Close Encounters was a work in progress, and even now I still feel like it's a work in progress. But I'm not, don't worry, there will not be a 4th version. This is it. But I felt that I was afforded a rare opportunity to go back into my movie and change it. As I even changed and saw the movie more objectively, I was able to make little tweaks here and there, which made me happy. The image that I've always taken sort of to bed with me at night if I ever flash on an image from Close Encounters and I don't have to think of it, it thinks of itself. And the image that always comes to my mind is when the little boy opens the door and all that orange light and yellow light pour across him. When I designed the shot and when I wrote it in the script, for me that was very symbolic of what only a child can do, is to trust the light. Open a door when an adult would run and hide and say, don't open the door, lock the door. There's things outside we don't understand, things that could kill us or change us. But the optimism of childhood and opening that door, and light being the presence of everything. Light is the inclusion of all colors, whereas black is the absence of all colors. That light was something that boy wanted to know more about. And so for me, thematically, Close Encounters is all about children opening doors onto beautiful sources of light. 2007, 21st century, sadly, people have a different interpretation of opening the doors. But back in the 70s, to open the door to a curiosity was a safe experience and something that we all look forward to in our lives.
This is director Steven Spielberg, whose most recent motion picture, Jaws, is already a legend. Now, Spielberg has turned his attention from the seas to the skies for his latest project, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Among the locations, Bombay, India, Devil's Tower, Wyoming, and Mobile, Alabama, where a gigantic structure has been even further enlarged and converted into a shooting stage, bigger by far than any available, even in Hollywood. This is the set for the climactic scenes of one of the most unusual films ever made. Spielberg's newest picture begins with the sighting of an unidentified flying object.
Aries 31 has traffic 2 o'clock, slightly above and descending.
Aries 31, can you say aircraft type?
Negative, Center. No distinct outline. Wait a second. Stand by 1. Okay, Center. Aries 31, the traffic is turned. He's heading right for my windshield. We're turning right immediately and leaving flight level 350 now.
Aries 31, descend and maintain flight level 310. Break, Allegheny 444, turn right 30 degrees.
Get on the order of the 45th recon wing. See what the hell they could be testing up there.
The traffic is approaching head-on, alter right, and really moving. And right by us, right now.
Austin, do you want to report officially? EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over.
Joining Spielberg in this project are a number of remarkable people. The producers, Julia Phillips and Michael Phillips, producers of The Sting and Taxi Driver. Douglas Trumbull is well known for the visual effects in the Andromeda Strain, Silent Running, which he also directed, and 2001, A Space Odyssey. For the music, there was only one choice. 11-time Academy Award nominee John Williams, composer of the scores of Jaws and Star Wars. The technical advisor is the world's foremost authority on unidentified flying objects, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, astronomer at Northwestern University. Heading the cast is Richard Dreyfuss, who has shown his exceptional talent in such diverse films as American Graffiti, The Apprenticeship of Dudy Kravitz, and Jaws. In addition, making his American debut as an actor is the great French writer-director Francois Truffaut, winner of the 1974 Academy Award for Day for Night. The American title of the picture, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, refers to an intriguing possibility.
Well, the close encounter of the first kind is one is close, but nothing really happened.
Close encounter of the first kind is visible contact with a UFO.
Forget the shape and forget how fast it's going. It's something that you just can't explain.
Close encounters of the second kind are those which leave a physical trace. Holes in the ground,
Burn rings,
broken tree branches,
telephone lines down,
animals disturbed.
the stopping of car engines.
And the close encounters of the third kind are the most interesting of all.
Close encounter of the third kind is really when you meet them.
Spielberg, who is both director and writer of the film, has spent 4 years on its creation.
He doesn't even turn the third time.
When he finished his first draft, I read it in one sitting and called him, and I said, this is the best screenplay I've ever read. It took about 6 months for me to pummel him into giving me the role.
They all pop one at a time, a little faster. They get a little angry, you know.
I don't know anybody else personally that I've worked with who can create the kind of excitement on film that he can.
Action, JB.
When Steven Spielberg made Jaws, the world went shark crazy. Reports of shark attacks increased by the thousands, and people began to approach the beach with caution and even with fear.
One step this way.
Now, with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Spielberg is making a film about an even more fascinating subject. And one thing seems certain. Just as Jaws gave us a new respect for the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of the sea, after seeing Close Encounters of the Third Kind, we will probably never look at the sky in quite the same way again. Like Jaws, Steven Spielberg's newest film begins in a small American town. But this time, it leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone.